Welcome back, Visions fans. This is the Leonis Report, episode 12. We are cruising along here. JB and I back for another podcast. We have an exciting lineup of stuff to talk about. JB, how's it going tonight?
It's going great. Just finished up dinner and kicking off another week here in War of the Visions. Feel like we're just getting unit after unit here, pretty
We
much
are.
since the third anniversary. It's been kind of a condensed schedule. They're obviously making room for something. We don't know exactly what, so we have some ideas, but it's another stocked week. So again, has a lot to talk about.
It definitely is. And we kind of knew it was coming. It's definitely accelerated. That being said, I don't know if the extra like a week or so that things have been accelerated would have changed a whole lot. It's not like we make 20,000 viz in a week. It wouldn't have changed a lot of polling strategies, but man, yeah, we're feeling it for certain. We do have Viga dropping next week, and just briefly what we're talking about today, guys. We're going to look at Viga, the weapon that comes with him. We're going to briefly talk about some of the Transcendences for Robb and Ildyra, and then for Garvall. We will look at some of the meta updates here for character specific things. We look at the War Room section. We will talk a little bit about the closure of the Black Tortoise Cup now that it's wrapping up tomorrow, and then a future look at Bridal, Alaya, and a bunch of Q&A questions that you all submitted, and we're super excited you did. There are a lot of good questions here, so that's
Thank
probably
you.
gonna be a big part of it. I know JB requested that. Seems like the flag was raised, so thank you guys. But we'll kick things off here with Viga. I just kind of dove into him this week. I know you've done your video a couple months ago on the deep dive. Has anything changed about your opinions of him, or what do you think of the character coming in here?
So I was really high on him when I first looked at him a few months ago. I should say I'm still very high on him, but the problem I think at the moment is the meta that he's dropping into. At least when I looked at him a few months ago, at that point, I didn't really know full well what was going to be happening with Bradley and the Earth meta. And I think on global, because of the hype about Bradley, the use rate and pull rate of him was probably even higher on global than it was over in JP. Seeing a lot of Bradleys out there. I know a lot of people are excited about Dialdo. Obviously, we have Dark Golem coming soon.
Yeah.
A lot of people are splashing in Bradley, and there's more rainbow comps. So, and there's also just a stunning lack of water. And I really am not sure if the 3.5 year anniversary is going to change that to kind of give a lot of targets for Viga to go at. So I'm in terms of the meta conditions, I'm a little bit lower on him. So how about you? What are you thinking?
I'm right there with you. Obviously, the meta is the first thing that comes to mind, and then you obviously want to think a little bit beyond that, and because we've constantly been in the prisoner of the moment, and 6 months later, you realize the true secret of someone. I will say though, even regardless of the meta, my initial impression, he's a very good post third anniversary character. He's obviously better than 95% of the characters. I'm just slightly underwhelmed though, if only because I do think he's a little vanilla in the main kit in terms of what he offers. He's got Dispel Re-Raise. That's cool. So don't 10 other good characters now. He's got a lot of penetrations. I think adequate kinds of penetrations, and he's a little unorthodox that you have to sort of get them from a variety of different sources, whereas some characters have them a little more innately. But I don't know. He's got really high HP, surprisingly. I didn't expect him to have as high of an effective HP as he does, but he's also got
Almost like a tank, basically.
He's actually got more effective HP than Sephiroth does. I was shocked to see that, but my huge asterisk is he's got no innate AoE resistance, which is almost like a win condition right now, where that's such a powerful impenetrable penetration that him not having any at all, I feel like just sets him up to be teed off on that. Although sure, he's got some bulk that others don't. I don't think he's going to be as bulky as people seem to think, and he doesn't really have it. He's got no imperils other than the 25 defense break. He does a fair amount of damage, but I just think it's, I don't know, kind of lackluster. It's hard to describe.
I think the other thing is that he is part of the Axe weapon group, and unfortunately, I was a little bit higher on that group a few months ago when King Coeurl vision card is coming in. That was at that point their sixth card. I was like, okay, it seems like Gumi is really trying to emphasize this Axe group. They really have not done anything since since that card came out.
Right.
So there's been no further development. There's been no further Axe units to kind of pair with it. Even the group itself is one of the fewest populated. Like there's very few units in Axe altogether. So that's kind of thinking about it from the job perspective. There's less opportunities, I think. Obviously, you can kind of mix Axe with other groups, and then you can kind of maybe go that direction. But I think Axe right now mixes most with Black Mage, I believe.
Yeah,
I think there's 3 cards of overlap there.
there is. The Halloween Lucy is a good one, but unfortunately, that
Yeah.
Halloween Lucy card overlaps the Coral in that they're both the unit. So there is some
Right.
redundancy there.
So 6 cards and 2 of them are unit resist. I guess, I mean, it could be worse, but no area resist card as well for Axe, which I think is the big thing, especially where you already mentioned that that's one of his kind of holes in his kit, is that he doesn't have any, innately. So
Absolutely. So my secondary thought for him, because he does have like an above average amount of modifiers, I think compared to some other characters, that my hope was he'd be a good rainbow unit for that reason, where you don't need the mastery ability of like the element and whatnot. But when you don't have an AoE resistance card in your job selection, that greatly neuters the rainbow capability. Obviously, you can still do like Death Machine and Holiday Party. If a character's good, you can still run those and be fine. Bradley does it constantly here. Yeah, that's definitely something that I noticed and at least like made a mention of.
I think that we're going to be looking at some Fest upgrades, and that should include Esther here very shortly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they're going to give her, a pretty nice upgrade. Obviously, that I think they could make a very nice pair. That was one thing that I looked at in my future look, was kind of pairing them up, building around Esther's vision card, which, to this date is, one of the best vision cards that we've seen come through.
Definitely.
Both offensively and defensively, a really nice package there. And it really allows you more flexibility to build him here in global than what he had in JP, because they don't have any slash pen card or unit resist card for the lightning element. So that's always been kind of a feather in the cap that we have here for the element.
Definitely. And to the, what I mentioned earlier about him being like a lackluster, whatever, that's not to say that he is. Like, if you look at lightning as an element, he is one of the best lightning units for sure. If you look at a lot of those lightning units, they just like haven't aged well. They've always been power crap. Cloud and Lightning from 13. Queen obviously kind of missed the mark. Even Esther has not seen the light of day for quite some time. But Lightning right now is basically just kind of like a Skahal one trick. If it's not Skahal in the party, there's really no Lightning party, if you know what I mean. So Viga is a strong addition to that, and he will enable them to kind of go back to their natural synergies. I don't it's not the right time for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's still opportunities to build in with like Alphonse and Resnick and have like a physical bruising team with some sustain. I still think that can be a decent team, and then just kind of waiting on Esther's upgrades too. But I agree. I think it's probably not going to be enough to kind of vault Lightning into like the top of the meta, like where Earth and Dark and Fire are at the moment.
Yep.
I think that there's a unit that we're going to be talking about a little bit later that is probably going to get them there. So
I would agree.
To be continued.
Definitely, definitely. And just to cap that off, because this does kind of loop into one of our Q&A at the end. When you talk about what can Lightning beat objectively, even if there's not a strong water presence, that's kind of where I look at his kit to say, like, does he offer anything that other characters don't already? And so there's that AoE re-raise dispel, like cool, like the new winged Sterne has it, Sylvie has it, there's a couple other characters that have other kinds of it. The defense break, there's more of that. The 100% guaranteed hit chance, multiple versions of it, there's definitely characters that kind of overlap that. I think the strike resistance buff is a good unique one for him. I know you'd specifically mentioned that too in your initial preview of him, where he's one of the few that has access to it, but outside of that, I just don't see a lot where he really adds where other characters just don't already have. And to that extent, you wouldn't pull a character that basically does what everyone else already does. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. One thing that I do like about him though is that he is very strong, like against slash damage, and he has the 100% hits. So I do think that he's a good character going into evade, because you don't need to build him for accuracy. He has a couple different 100% hits. You can just build him up for bulk, and he'll be tanky enough to kind of last through, kind of the initial fire onslaught, and then retaliate, once the sure hit nullification goes away. So that, I think that is definitely a plus for him. I'm really high on him as a manual unit. He's got very, very strong mobility. He can get up to 4 innately, and then he's got the Dragoon sub job where he can get up to 5 without using a TMR. So very, very nice manual unit, I think. Obviously, the Berserk potential there on the limit burst is
huge.
Definitely a game winner.
That limit break is special. That is a very good limit break. Yeah. The 67, chance to Berserk, as well as the AoE Dispel. Even one of those alone is very strong. To put 2 of them together, though, 49 AP, really, really game changer.
Big fan of his TMR as well.
Me too.
So I think that's, regardless, we're going to be seeing, probably some Viga out there, maybe not a ton. Maybe some people will pull for the TMR because it's definitely a game changer as well. Obviously, you can nullify it pretty easily with a Trust Stone passive, but, definitely something that you might need to consider going forward.
Definitely. It's the kind of thing that you just throw in a one character, you're not expecting it, all of a sudden you get Berserked and your whole battle's different. It's that simple.
Exactly.
So good. Well, I know there is also a weapon that comes unique with him. It is an axe that's custom made, if you will. It's not necessarily specific for him though, where it has, Viga specific buffs. It does have just more general buffs here, where it's 30 lightning attack and 15 slash attack. Now, obviously, when you talk about equipping axes for lightning, that list is pretty small, if not non-existent.
He's the only one on it.
Yeah, so it might as well be tailor made for him. I don't mind the weapon. Obviously, like there's a lot of lightning weapons that they add that lightning 30 attack, and so that's why I was saying from like a rainbow team perspective, he's got some things that can maintain the net modifiers. But I don't know. I'm not blown away by the weapon. It's certainly nice.
It's kind of in a long line of lightning weapons. We have started off with the Coeurl sword, and we got the spear with 9S,
Yep.
and
Buster
we have
sword, I think.
the Buster sword, the Prunus lamina.
Yep.
So they pretty much got the whole collection now of lightning weapons.
They do. So it's a good one. Obviously, I think it's probably best for him. I also do genuinely like the Miraga TMR though as that second option when you're trying to min max your attack stats. But other than that, I know there's the Summer Killfay axe that's got the slash res pen on it and the accuracy. I actually don't mind that one for the accuracy build. I know we talk about the 100% hit chance, but then again, he's literally so blind that you probably do want to put some accuracy in there somewhere. And I actually do think there's an honorable mention for that Summer Killfay axe with the aim build, that it's got the 10 accuracy and I think it's 25 up above, and you don't trade off a lot of attack stat for it, and it's still got like slash res pen. It's overall pretty healthy.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the Maraga's axe because he definitely has a little bit of AP concerns. Like his skills are fairly expensive, especially with that limit burst coming in at the 49 cost too.
Yep.
Definitely, that's another thing to think about with him is how are you going to get that AP up so he can string off his attacks?
For sure, for sure. Well, good. And then alongside him, a week later, we're getting the King Coeurl, both Esper and Vision card. We will do a slightly deeper dive on next week's episode once it's a little more pertinent, obviously about to be released, but figured honorable mention now. There's no doubt that's going to be a very important like card in Esper for him when you're talking about min-maxing his potential. So don't sleep on that, but we'll talk about that more next week. In the meantime, continuing on with some of the updates, we do have some Transcendences here. So 3 characters in particular. It's Robb Horn, Ildyra, and Garvall. We'll kick things off with Robb Horn. Any specific hype for him or thoughts?
So I mean, to be honest, I hadn't thought too much about Robb, since I got his TMR. I've never, other than like PvE and maybe like, tinkering around once in a while, I never have used him. I think though that this is actually a pretty decent upgrade for him. He is an 80 cost. He's an evade unit. He kind of fits into that prototype for the light element. They have several units there in that bucket. But he gets some AP help. That's always been one of his concerns. He gets another 10 evade, so it actually ties him as it will tie him as the most accurate innately evade oriented character in the game with UR Zazan.
Good call out.
He's going to be at 88 innate evasion. I did calc that out earlier.
And correct me if I'm wrong, his vision card has a 100% hit chance on it too, doesn't it? If you're using that with him.
Absolutely.
So yep. Another good thing in his cap. Yep.
And then he gets an upgrade to his devotion buff, which is it's kind of weird with him because his EX upgrades have been coming in on his sub job, his main job sub job, which is always really awkward.
Yeah.
But the devotion, it's getting an upgrade to ignore sure hit now. So that's obviously really, really nice, especially with how evasive that this guy is going to be. Light has really good cards to back it up. Really, really nice 80 cost awaken, I think.
I agree. I think it's really smart that they put it on devotion because the illusion buff is, like a first priority. So I like the rotation of going illusion buff first and then into devotion. I think that's really smart for letting that, ignore sure hit last that extra turn as you move up. I have tempered expectations for him. I'm of the opinion that, most of these characters, if they're not great pre-Transcendence, they're probably still not going to be great post-Transcendence. Usually there's just too big of a gap that unless they do some massive change, you don't notice it. I agree. This is actually a very good Transcendence for him. I think it hits all the things that you wanted. I just don't think it's going to improve his pick rate at all for much of what you see. Light evasion as it stands right now is already kind of dead in the water, and he suffers for the same reason that Locke, Violet, and Elena would. So it's good, but I don't think it's going to change much.
Yeah, he's still going to have a lot of the same weaknesses he had before. Like his damage isn't really going to be up to par with a lot of the units that we're using now. So I think he's kind of fits into he's a nice 80 cost, and where you can break those out is a bit more limited, I think, in the grand scheme of things. Probably more looking at like limited cost content kind of play.
100%. And then that next unit here is Ildyra, and she's getting a 10% to all attack type resistances, a 10 healing power, and an upgrade to height resistivity, where it's getting 50% strike res. Again, as we mentioned, kind of a unique resistance nowadays to acquire, and it will apply to herself as well. This one I think is fair. I think Ildyra is honestly still a pretty decent unit for the broad player base. Actually, let me phrase this. For the broad player base, she's an exceptionally good unit. So for most people, I think this is a really good thing to awaken. I don't think it does enough though to slot her into that spot into a modern water team. I think there's too many water units right now that are just heads and tails better. And honestly, that 10 healing power I don't think is enough. The calculator heals have not scaled well with the power creep of like HP in the game. So I mean, I think it's good. I just don't know if it's enough to really elevate her to modern water teams. That being said, I still think she's a super solid healer, and this is a great upgrade.
I agree. I like this one too. That buff is really nice because like you said, it's adding the strike resistance now. It already had the pierce and missile resistance.
Yep,
It can go up to, I think, even higher than 15%, like if the tile heights are working out correctly.
that's right.
Obviously, you can never quite gauge if that's going to work out, but I believe it can go up to, I want to say 35% if the target height is multiple of 2 is how the description is written. So I read that as it goes from 15 to 35%. So
I agree.
that's pretty nice.
That's substantial.
And then the effect also is today it only affects the targets. It's going to affect her now too. So that's a pretty nice buff for her.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's one that I'll awaken not right away, but I think eventually this is one that I will get to. I think she's a useful unit, especially her limit burst is very unique in the game.
Yeah.
You can do some really cool things with it even now.
I agree.
I've always liked Ildyra.
Same. I think if you go down the list of supports, she still has maintained some good value relative to others. And then the last one here is Garvall, who getting an upgrade here, 15% HP, 15 dark attack. His 120 ability will now pierce through enemies, so it's not just that unit attack anymore. What are your initial thoughts on seeing his upgrade here?
This one is really meh. Like they really have focused his upgrades into HP, which is cool. Actually, he can get really nice HP now. He'll be well over 10,000 in a build now with this added HP. The dark attack is fine because he has a mixture of like missile and magic attacks. And then I've never really been a huge fan of the Job 25 because of how redundant it is with burst.
Yep.
And I've always wanted them to do something different there with, whether it was magic res pen or a break or imperil or something just a little bit different there. So, I think he's still usable. He's still okay as an 80 cost. Yeah, he's just okay now. I don't know. What do you think?
I thought this was really bad.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point that his HP level is above average for what you would expect, but I think most of these characters where the real game changer is not just in the stat, because that's typically just like a little small power creep adjustment. There are very few characters that get a stat increase and you're like, wow, like this character's better than everyone now. Like, no, it's usually just because they're like lagging behind. So it's usually their 120 ability where you get that real like upgrade where there's some kind of intangible that either fixes their impact on the battlefield or just something different. I don't know. You could even look at Robb and Ildyra, what we just talked about for 120 abilities, like completely changes a bunch of things, and his just add piercing to it is just so lackluster. Not a fan.
I feel like he was a unit that was so strong on his release, and he continued to be strong well into the level 120 meta, that Gumi really was kind of light-handed with his awakening.
Yep.
And unfortunately, in the long run of the game, that has been, I think, a little bit of a detriment to him.
I agree. Good. Well, we do some honorable mentions here for the MR units. I know Salir, Vistral, and Revelka are 3 that are getting new ones. I don't know if I have much to say. I'm not terribly hyped for them. I know those units we ranked relatively low on our MR tier list that we did with the City Gaming a couple weeks ago here. So to that extent, I don't think any of these really do much to amp them up, but I don't know. Any thoughts differently or things you want to mention?
Revelka, I think, is pretty decent. Like she is obviously one of the newer class of MRs. It's not incredible. Like it's enough that she's already usable like in the low cost formats. It's going to make her a little bit better. We are getting it a little bit early, but I think it just it makes her a little bit more tanky, a little bit more damage, but nothing all that crazy. The Job 25, I think, also is getting upgraded for
It is. So it's going. It's basically just a mod increase. It's going from 165% to 200%. So those. That's why I have tempered expectations. I think
Yeah.
mods are only as good as the penetrations in the enemy. They're strong, but it doesn't really change the character. That's essentially all we wanted to talk about here for the first part here for the Battlegrounds of Ardra. Before we transition to the War Room, where we will cover a couple different topics here. We'll kick things off though with the draft league update that Kayshawn was here for. Last week we wrapped up our own personal drafts. That was a very cool experience. And again, recapping for those that don't know anything about it, it's just essentially like your fantasy football league, your fantasy sports league, where there's a pool of players. We go in kind of a snake up and down format. We have our own schedule and little leagues. You can't pick a character that someone else has picked. You only can pick up to 11. We have them split out into tiers, and they have their own costs assigned to them too, where obviously some units have like higher or lower costs than they should. What do you think of the process? Do you have fun with that?
The draft took a bit longer than I anticipated, so that's killed a little bit of the hype after like the first day. But overall, it was a good experience. I had a lot of fun with it. I'm happy with my team. I won't spoil it who I have yet because Kason is putting out a video. But I am happy with my team. I think that overall it's a solid team. That there was one mistake that I made in the draft that I'm kicking myself for that I made kind of early on, but because I was kind of focused more on my individual team rather than studying at that point what other people were doing and reacting to what they were doing.
Yep.
And I quickly realized that and kind of started doing that, after that. But at that point, that early mistake had already been made. So, how about you? How did it go?
I was very happy with it. I was kind of the same. I made a very early mistake, and it's not even a mistake. It was more just I got bit in the butt. My second pick, I would mulligan that. My personal I picked second because I had a plan of who I would pick down the line in those lower cost rarities, and those characters I was targeting got stolen. So those initial teams that I had theory crafted no longer existed. So my second pick, although it's still a good one, you guys will see that soon. I don't know, tempered expectations, but I'm still very happy with my team. I still think it'll do well.
Yeah, that's similar kind of thing that happened to me, and that's kind of just our experience. That next time we wouldn't make the same mistake. Is
Yep.
we're playing against a lot of veterans in the league that's have maybe done one or two drafts already. So
It's true.
this is how you learn.
It's true. I will say one of the things that I'm looking forward to most personally about it, one of the downsides, if you will, about joining VIP is that it definitely limited what I can do for content as it pertains to like showing off like offensive teams or walls or whatever. Because there's a lot of competitive secrets, if you will. So I'm super excited to be able to like take my replays and my strategy from the draft league and talk more about like, all right, why did I choose for the AI to do this? Why did I equip this? Really do some of that theory crafting 101 that I used to do a lot more that I don't have the chance to do as much now. So I'm very much looking forward to that aspect of it.
Oh, that's great. That sounds like a lot of fun.
For sure. Well, we'll segue here now to our meta update. So we'll once again use WOTV stats, and we're going to look specifically at Bradley, Winged Sterne, and then a little bit about the strike meta, just to see who people are using them in teams with and kind of like what their success looks like.
Yeah, so these are some of the newest units that have been released in the game. Just kind of anecdotally, I've been seeing them quite often. I've seen people experimenting them not only in arena and free match and things like that, but also bleeding into Guild War now. Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see where these guys are showing up in kind of the totality of the brackets.
Most definitely. So I know Bradley has already made his case, and I think we'll probably
Wow.
look at top 100 guilds for this snapshot, and I'll probably try to pick May 31st because I believe that was the first date after limited guild wars. And so if you're looking at offense here, he's on a little over 400 teams. On defense, a little bit lower. I'm not surprised by that. Obviously that number doesn't mean much without context of other characters, but let's take a quick peek down here on offense and defense in guild wars, and I think you'll see a picture. Yeah, okay, skews I think a little more toward top 30, which makes sense. You have a little more active players, maybe some higher spenders here in the top 30. Are you intrigued? You don't see him as much on defense here, or does that make sense? Or
I mean, in terms of defense, I think a lot of people are still kind of holding tight on the dark walls, at least from what I've seen. That's still primarily what I've seen in the top 15 to 20.
I agree.
Um,
Yep.
I think in top 10, it maybe you guys are experimenting a bit more with Earth or Rainbow walls, but
A little bit. We will splash Bradley in a couple of rainbow teams just because he is just so self-sufficient. I'm fairly certain on as we go down to some of these teams here on attack and defense, I think we'll get our answer. Intuitively speaking, so I'm gonna skip ahead real quickly to defense teams, and the way this toggle works here, you have your toilet paper and your bicep, and the toilet paper means they stumped someone, so like someone attacked and this team stumped them. The muscle means that they got wiped by someone on the first attack, and if you click on this, you'll see just how easily, obviously, wind is able to take these out, and I'm fairly certain that's all you need to know about why it's not used as prevalently on defense. That you have 5 or 6 teams of wind, and all of a sudden that's an easy 30 stars that you get for free on a wall. So a little bit of downside risk there, but team wise, any surprises here seeing who he's matched up with?
Not really. I mean, on attack, you have kind of the typical 100 cost Earth units there. Oberon, Mashari, a little bit of Zazan too. Yrel in there too. I like Yrel buffing the courage removal onto Bradley. I think that's really strong because he already can remove re-raise.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Personally, I've been kind of starting to mix him into some strike teams because they have a couple of really strong cards that overlap. I think I have seen some strong teams mixing him in with Winged Sterne.
Yeah,
because they share the same weapon group too. So
yeah, I agree totally. We definitely use him in a variety of rainbow teams just for the purpose of he just acts so self-sufficiently on his own. If I were to go to some of the next few pages, you probably would see some of that bleed in, or maybe not. Apparently not. Apparently, the most common teams are really the mono Earth style with him. I'm not unsurprised. I think it takes a lot of extra, theory crafting, if you will, and vision card mastery and the job based vision cards. If you assume that most people haven't invested super heavily in the job based vision cards, that eliminates that potential altogether. So I am not slightly surprised. I don't think Oberon's probably the best choice. I think Oberon's a little out of his league nowadays. I've seen better success with Immortals as on, but obviously I think Oberon's a solid pick.
Yeah, it's Oberon. He's still slow. Like his main source of survivability is the barrier, and that just gets
It's nothing.
crushed now right now. So
even pierce damage, I think pierce damage is a lot less scary than it used to be. Yeah, no real surprises here. Obviously, just that a very high pick rate, and I think we'll see that comparatively in a second when we also.
So that had him there at almost 15% there on attack and almost 11% of guilds in defense.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. You're right. If you hover over here, you're right. That 14.87%, I believe, is how many attack teams Bradley's on. So he's basically on 15% of the teams.
So that's pretty good. I mean, he's still a relatively new unit. So
absolutely. And I know we wanted to look at Wing Sterne here, who really had a chance to shine in Arena this last week. For anyone who was paying attention, he was one of the bonus units, and that was a whole different topic to get into of how crazy that was. But
he can get some crazy area resistance. Trying to cleave through 80% area resistance is no joke. He just laughs it off.
Incredibly difficult, and the pick rate here much lower, only about 6% of teams. And I'm not terribly surprised by that. I think there was some tempered responses on his release, and for good reason. Usage here in top 100 when it comes to offense and defense. Yeah, not surprised here as well. Light's very risky on defense right now. Obviously the threat of dark for I think the majority is too big and not worth it. And even on attack, again, it's one of those things I don't know if Sterne does much that most other characters don't already do. It's hard to describe.
I think that the thing that hurts him the most is the low range of his barrier break, just being two tile reach.
Absolutely.
If that was a longer, if that was even like 3 or 4 range, he would be like a completely different unit, I think.
I would agree with that entirely. Yeah. Yeah. Barriers, although we kind of, wave them off nowadays because there's so much barrier break, and we say that for good reason. If you don't have access to barrier break, it's still noticeable. It's still a good form of defense. Yeah. But for characters that like really solely rely on it, you just got to kind of take it down a peg. But obviously that's one of Sterne's weaknesses. And just looking at the teams here, I don't think I'm necessarily surprised. I expected Sylvie. I expected Warrior of Light. I'm a little surprised by the amount of Elena, but then again, maybe not. Everyone has her, so why not?
I'll tell you what, I played quite a bit of Arena this past week, and I got slapped around a couple of times by some Elenas, some 140 Elenas in that specific composition there.
Interesting. I didn't see any.
I was surprised at some of the damage that she can put out if she's set up well.
The damage, I'm not surprised, because again, at the end of the day, she's still scaling off of Spirit, which people are not gearing heavily for. There's enough chaining innately in her that she does have those light slash chains with him. And then you talk about what light does in terms of like Dark Bahamut has slash attack up, and the Scions, the Ramsakard has slash attack. So mod wise, that's obviously a lot of good things there.
Personally, I played around with that Wall, Jaden, and Sterne comp a little bit.
I did
I
too.
thought that one was pretty good. I thought.
I quickly hit a ceiling with Jaden though, where I think it was the map in particular, just a couple squares, maybe not long enough that
Yeah,
he would die relatively quickly, and a lot of his abilities are AOE oriented, and so there was enough AOE resistance going on there that I don't think he killed things quick enough for how fast he died, if that makes sense.
it's the AI is so frustrating because gunners will constantly move towards other units to get the affinity bonus because it will increase their damage with the dexterity that they get. That it's just it's always a pain in the neck with them.
He's definitely a unit that needed a move -1 on his passive, so you give Bowtie and just make him a 1 move unit for sure. For sure. Slightly surprised by the amount of Warrior of Lights, but it worked even in Arena this week. Warrior of Light is still immensely tanky, even with healing power down. When you put him and Stern next to each other, where you basically force enemies to AOE attack them because they're together, obviously, they just do really good things. It was very difficult to get through.
It's crazy, especially when you have Sylvie there to pop on a heal just to top them off, and
Yep,
she still does great damage. Because say they take big AOE hits, they don't take much damage. She'll come in and throw her slash out and do a ton of damage. So
definitely.
I wonder when she's going to get her upgrades because that could certainly be pretty significant.
Definitely. I'm also very intrigued too to see if people start changing her AI a little bit, where before they had her a specific build to synergize the Lena, and Stern kind of does some of what she needs to do with the AoE reuse move and whatnot. That I'm intrigued that if people don't change the way they're utilizing her currently. So we were also going to look at strike comps here, and I know we were going to initially look at it through the lens of Alphon's usage, where obviously him being a tank kind of gives him the edge over some of the other strike based units. Him having the 140 gives him the edge over some of those, like Snow, for instance, as a strike based unit. But I will say, I think there's probably more Ed than Al, but I could be wrong. So Al's at currently about 9% usage. It's higher than Wing Stern. Not terribly surprising.
Looks like quite a bit there in the top 10,
Yes.
at least on attack.
Yeah, and attack he is still a super solid unit because again, you're talking about either lightning teams or just the fist teams. I know him with Bradley again is still like a really strong combo. We're using that.
Yeah, so these Full Metal Alchemists, I think they've huge impacts on the meta. I think with for Roy, obviously less so. I mean, I think we looked at him a couple of weeks ago and it was pretty non-existent. I think even since then, I certainly haven't seen a ton of them out there. Though I did play around with them a little bit in Arena, but the other three units with Ed, Al, and Bradley have been all over the place. Very, very high pick rates, I think, across the various game modes.
Absolutely. It's just so flexible. They're so well rounded. They're so self sufficient in what they do that they don't require a lot of external, input. We're also seeing Alphonse here primarily being used in the mono lightning teams. I will say though, I'm this strike team is really the bread and butter though, and you can kind of see that by the number of stars on average as well. Many owls are in the top 10, at least anecdotally speaking. I know that this team is very formidable in that it basically beats almost all mono elements otherwise.
Yeah, I was going to say you can look at the graph next to it. It's beating a variety of different teams there, which is nice to have that flexibility, especially in a blind setup like Guild War. You don't know necessarily what is coming at you each day.
I will look quickly at Ed because Ed being a free unit, there are a lot of people who are kind of like Wind stands just because of how strong Wind has been, but also because if we're talking about Bradley being very strong, you think there'd be like an inverse correlation with Ed that you get an uptick in Earth, you would hope for an uptick in Wind. Doesn't seem like it here. 6% or so. I am slightly surprised by that, but again, kind of the same idea. You're seeing a lot of the concentration here in those top guilds, and I would imagine the teams, yeah, it's not even Mono Wind being the top one. It is the strike team where you see Ed featured the most.
He's such a good attacker. Like just being able to the dispel that he gets like in such a large radius, just having that innately on his attacks is so strong.
It
And then
is.
especially combining that with Alphonse, who has the innate protect dispel. It's
Well,
tough combination.
my favorite thing is the select 2 or whatever it is that bypasses the AoE resistance. Whereas we talk about, there's so much that in the game that's such a valuable thing for Ed to bring to the table that there's just really no like strong way to defend against that team. They'll hit you with everything: AoE, 3 different elements, unit based attacks. You get a 45 defense break, healing power down, dispel on alpha, like you name it, barrier breaks everywhere. It's got everything.
I think that this strike meta is going to have some legs to it because I think so many people are tapped out from the third anniversary that they're not really going to be able to be pulling on this anti-strike tech that Gumi is putting out now. I don't think a ton of people have been pulling for the Reagans, and I don't envision a ton of people are going to pull for Viga. Maybe some people will pull for Miranda. I think it's, going to be probably until like Dialdo or Raf come into the game. These units are going to have a lasting impact.
Raf for certain. I feel like that's going to be a high pick for most people, and then you'll see the end of it. I agree with that. And then finally, just wrapping up the war room, just like a small recap, if you will, on the Black Tortoise Cup that's ending essentially tomorrow. Any thoughts on the season for you? I know I've seen Howell going up the ranks here. You guys have been flirting with like top 15 every now and then. I think you're like 13 right now.
Yeah, the Black Tortoise Cup has been really good for us. Obviously, I think that we've benefited a little bit from some of the turnover, within and kind of exodus of some folks kind of within the top. I would say 30.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that, you've heard, everybody's kind of seen, some longtime friends have left, some shuffling has been going on. Our guild has stayed relatively strong. We haven't really lost anybody. And in fact, we gained a couple of people that were very strong, and that helped us out. We haven't really changed up all that much what we're doing. We're just very chill. I mean, we try, but it's not overly so.
Right.
But yeah, we're doing very good. I would say kind of MVP for us has been Super Yuffie-chan, kind of killing everybody. So
nice.
I'm still lighting everybody up for 6 stars a day with a Yuffie. So
I believe it. Well, you know what? There's something to say about evasion that even if a evade team isn't super strong, we joke about it in the sense that it's just an accuracy check. You'll just win if people just, regardless of the strength of the enemy, if they don't have the accuracy, you win. And so when you consider, I don't know, how people build their teams, if they're not adequately building for evasion, even if their team on paper is better than yours, you win. So I can definitely imagine that being a strong thing to play with. I know for us, I think it's technically been just the dark teams, quite honestly. We've gotten really creative with our offensive varieties and our offensive teams, but from a defense perspective, dark has been super solid. Not only necessarily from, how can I phrase this? I think one of the best things about it, it's not easily 6-starable, which is really important in top 5 Guild War, where the less 6 stars you can allow from a efficiency standpoint, the better. And so we've really been relying on like Dwayne and Sephiroth and Dark Fina as another, but we have had some other iterations, but Dwayne's improvements have been genuinely really good. That you talk about like fire and that accuracy check, like Dwayne and Sephiroth cover that, and even Dark Fina, we don't make her blind as a bat. We find ways around that. Even Strike Team, there's actually some RNG there where they can be relatively competitive. So Dark obviously did just really well for us. So MVP for us.
Yeah, and I know at this point in JP's timeline, Dark was kind of trailing off a little bit here as Strike kind of entered the equation. Obviously, Gumi giving some love to Dwayne was a pretty big boon for Dark.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be more to come.
Definitely. Yeah, if we didn't have that, we would not even be remotely close to the same, for certain. Good. All right. Well, we'll segue here to the Leonis Spy Report. We do have a new unit we'll cover here. That's Bridal Alaya, who is a new lightning unit on the Viga topic. Now, she is strike-oriented, which, obviously synergizes really well with Alphonse and even Viga's sub-job there. Any initial impressions? I know she's one of those units that got a lot of hype to start here. What are your thoughts here?
I think this unit is absolutely broken. I think she's like she's Bradley Sephiroth tier easily, maybe even better. I don't know, but at least as good as them. I've seen videos of her damage capping Earth units without the Imperil. I mean, her Imperil gets up to 60%. Like,
it's insane.
Not even including the Imperil, she was able to damage cap like with her multi-select skill. Her multi-select skill is insane because it's just like Amnelis's. It gets up to the 5 range in every direction, and it's 3 target select as well, just like Amnelis. So
yep.
She's like a physical version of her, which obviously being more tanky and being able to kind of get into the middle of the opponents and use that kind of ability without dying is pretty nice.
No, you nailed it. Everything I was going to say there too. And she's one of the first units that has this strike attack resistance penetration as well, 40 of it. So you talk about resisting it. That's one of those things that she bucks the trend in bypassing that. Obviously, bypasses that AOE resistance, as you mentioned, by having those select a couple. I think imperils nowadays, we're in the phase of the game again where I think imperils are going to be very, very important. What's one of the things I've noticed in terms of like grading some of my characters here, where characters that don't have some of those innate imperils, I don't think are going to reach heights that they should. Where sure, they have all the penetration off the charts and that's amazing, but you need to get people into the negatives to really recognize some of the damage upside, and you're seeing less of the imperils in the new characters nowadays. And she bucking that trend, obviously, that's a massive source of her damage.
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of the second in line of these bridal or celebration units. So we had looked at Jaden a couple of weeks ago. I think that she puts Jaden to shame.
Oh yeah,
I'm not even hyperbole. Like
yep,
this unit is like on a different tier. Like, and I think we've already been seeing that on JP. Like Jaden has not really made much of a dent at all. There was some thought that okay, maybe with Howlett and with Reagan, with Bellis, maybe they can do something against the Dark Walls there. Really hasn't done much of anything as of yet. So I think there's a lot of ways you can kind of get around Jaden's trick of, obviously he's got the super large barrier and he's got like the hate down, which you can be creative and kind of either baiting that to an AoE or doing other things. But this unit is just pure damage and she is going to kill a lot of people.
it's pure damage and pure utility. That's kind of where I even peg Viga down a slot, right? But this girl, I mean, she's got 30 area resist to the party, 20% slash res as well. I mean, there's some conditions here for courage and whatnot, but you have dispel auto revive as well. So we talk about like re-raise dispel. Like she's got it on a buff. You don't need it on an ability. She's got decreased down of 200%. Now again, this is a unit based attack, but it's the big AoE that select a couple. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, but select three of them. So on selecting three, decrease CT of 20. Also cancel ability activation. So again, already some overlap with Viga. She's just like better at it than he is. You talk about paralyzed. She can do the same. He has it on one attack. She's got it here on an AoE. Up and down, just superior. It's hard to even compare.
The other thing that I'm really surprised to see with this unit is that I was really worried that Gumi was just going to forget about the strike meta and that we've invested into these Full Metal Alchemist units and what's going to happen to these strike teams that we've all been excited about. Well, they're going back to the well again, and I'm sure we're probably going to be seeing maybe a new strike vision card, job card coming, next week or the week after.
Yep.
So, yeah, really exciting news. I think for people that invested into Alphonse and Strike, this is going to be an incredible unit.
Totally agreed. I need to do a deep character dive, but as of right now, I would agree. Broken levels that there's not really any counterplay other than just playing her better than your enemy. So good. All right. Well, we'll segue here now. Then finally to the Leonis Town Square report. We got, I think, like 8 questions. We will save a couple for next week, in case we don't get many more to replenish it. But we have 5 that we'll talk about today. So the first question is, if you could permaban a unit from the game, who would they be and why? Did you have any first thoughts here? Who you'd pick?
So I don't. This is a tough one. I mean, if I'm going like historically, kind of in the history of the game, I have a long running hatred for Halloween Little Leela.
Oh,
And it's purely from like the manual side of the game. She is like a cancerous unit in that side because she's so mobile. Like she has the massive AoEs, does a ton of damage. She's always been great for, and obviously she only costs 72. So she's been part of like the different kind of cheese blade iterations. So yeah, I would blow that unit out of the game. No questions asked.
that's awesome. Yeah, this is a tough one because if you're talking about like current snapshot, because obviously historically speaking, there's a lot of units where we want it out at the time. You could obviously think back to certain metas, but like today, currently, if I could permaban a unit, this is a tough one because there's a couple units I think just need tweaks, not necessarily banning. I know Skahal comes to mind where it's like I just need a tweak for him. I don't need to ban him. Like he's got the courage as part of his passive. I have no idea why people that have courage removal abilities can't just override that passive and dispel the courage when they kill him. I don't get why that doesn't actually function. So like I don't blame the character for that. I blame like the mechanics, but I still, I think it falls under that same umbrella. I don't want to say him. If I'm going to be really risque here, I'll be honest. I might go SR Little Leela if I had to take a unit out. She's so disproportionately strong for an SR unit that absolutely game changes off of like, like three big things of utility of like the decreased healing power, that silence, then the 100% hit chance. Obviously, like it's just that like damage uptime. When you consider what the Transcendence did, like the cost of the Transcendence and the stats it gives her, I feel like it's just so disproportionately strong for an SR unit that current day, she probably is my unit pick.
So we both hate Little Leela. It's
Yeah.
it's agreed.
For no other reason than like just disproportionately strong, and that's not going to go away soon. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean, she completely takes mages out of the fight.
Right.
It's very it's very hard to there's only a couple of TMRs in the game which nullify the silence. So
Even the AoE healing power down. A lot of units have that, but that's the 100 cost units have that. That's like a CT and a HEO PC utility. Do you know what I mean? Not a spammable SR unit PC utility. So yeah.
well, plus hers is 50 in the large diamond, which is more than Setia gets in her thermal exposure.
Right.
It's more than Perrine gets in her vortex kick. They're
Yep.
both at 40, so
Yep. Good call out.
it's
Absolutely.
really really good.
So that brings us up here to questions 2 and 3, which are obviously very similar. They're job vision card related. So we'll kick this off. Thoughts on adding a job or weapon based mastery similar to elemental mastery buffs on a unit? Would that promote more rainbow compositions, or will people double down and pair units of the same element in similar jobs for more cancer? I know I'd mentioned this, I think, either last week or the week before, as something I'd like to see. I'm actually pro that kind of change. Obviously, you will see people double down on pairing people of the same elements. That being said, I've always maintained this. I don't think that 15 or 30 mod or 10 or 20% HP is the difference between you winning or losing battles. It's a big part of like the synergy, if you will, but I don't think just double dipping and putting together two units so you get an extra 15 mod because of it is going to like win you the fight, particularly because it should be relatively balanced. I don't know. I'm pro that change. I don't think it'd be abused.
I like that change too. I'm a fan of things that kind of reward horizontal progression in this game. That's the horizontal progression is kind of one of the things that I enjoy, and collecting and kind of building up all the units is something I really enjoy. So getting rewards for doing that and things to look forward to as you unlock new units and build them up, I think is interesting and fun. So I'd be a fan of it, and like you said too, it kind of can open up the maybe new doors or new windows for new synergies too.
Yep.
I'm a fan of that. I hope that they would at least consider something like this in the future.
Absolutely. So this one a little bit longer, but I think we could probably summarize this so I can take this off of our faces for a second. But basically, job-based vision cards have been a hot topic. What hopes do we have for improvements or adjustments to the system? We know that they're getting better sorting options. We know they're reducing the cost by 10. Do we have any other personal changes? For instance, merging job groupings, increasing the amount of jobs, bigger buffs, etc., etc. And a special shout out here that this person made to JB for your Google Slides presentation of it, which I have used extensively, by the way, for your filtering options. Big thanks on that. But yeah, what do you think? Any changes you additionally want to see?
So my take on this has really been the same since the beginning, and the idea and premise of job cards is awesome. I love it. I love it's promises a new meta. What the problem I think for me has been the delivery of a new meta, which at this point we're what are we 8 9 months into since we first got our first job card,
Yep.
and we're only now starting to see one or two variations of some units kind of opening things up into some rainbow teams. Obviously that's going to compound over time and get better, but I just think it's taken way too long to kind of shift us out of mono element, or at least give us some compelling alternative, which we've been in the mono element era since the first anniversary. And we're going on 2.5 years now where it's very stale at this point. I think that if they kind of gave us more free cards, that would be a great way to accelerate the movement of it and push us into it further. So I would urge Gumi to, they have given us some, I'll give them that. They have given us a few very nice cards. They should do it once a month.
I think that's fair. I like that. I know for me personally, I actually don't know if I have any changes from this point out. Let me rephrase that. I think they've finally gotten around to enough AoE and unit and agility cards that now these are viable. I think Gumi underestimated how much we value those attributes in creating a team, and that they're the basic fundamentals. That by slow bleeding a couple vision cards that had none of those attributes, you're just not going to use them. It makes no sense in the comparison of mono element. It's a huge nerf to whatever team you're building. So I would have probably changed maybe the initial rollout of which ones they released to get a faster adoption. But now that we're already there, I can't go back in time. I will say though, I think the filtering options in game, even for what I've seen, I think still could be better on from what JP got. And the limited ones I've seen, I think it's basically just that like if you like zoom in on the vision card, you'll have an icon on it of who in your party is being affected by it currently. But I want way better filtering options just to say like, if I put a vision card in the slot and then I go to add a unit, I want you to black out all the units that aren't eligible for this card. Like, when you go into a cost battle and you have a cost limit, and once you put in two characters and you go into add the third, it blacks out everyone who's in. Like, I want to see that. I want to see filter options where it's like, click two jobs in the filter and then show me the vision cards where both jobs are eligible for that. Like, I absolutely need that filter system because otherwise we're just using your online resource and mode of calc. It sucks.
Yeah. I don't want to be updating this thing for the rest of my life.
Nope. No, definitely not.
Come on, Gumi.
But please do. Please keep updating. Okay, so that brings us to question number 4. How to make a Guild Wars team that can attack multiple elements, and how to be efficient with time during mock battle for those that need to do it on lunch break. That's a legit problem. And how often do we use armor? So this is a multifaceted question. We'll kind of kick things off on the first part of it here. How to make a Guild Wars team that can attack multiple elements. How do you approach that, JB?
So personally, I do kind of a study of what the opponents are sending out on Guild Battle. Kind of WOTV stats is a great tool for that. It's we can do it even much more efficiently than we've ever been able to do it in the past. Try to get a gauge of what's being run out there, what the actual team compositions are, what the units are in it. Do they lean physical? Do they lean magical? Are they somewhere in between? And then you kind of look at what elements are good at counteracting that. And then, okay, you found one. Maybe you're seeing a lot of dark, which is see all over the place right now. You're also seeing a lot of earth. So something like the wind element actually would be good for countering both of those. Wind is obviously naturally very good at countering earth, and wind can also do very well against dark, just for general bulk, area resistance, and pierce damage is something that a lot of dark units are actually weak to as well. So somebody like Glaciella works well there.
It's a good recommendation. I like that. I know for me, it's probably more of an emphasis on your Trust Dome passives and using Esper nodes that you're not used to using. When you talk about countering multiple elements, when it comes to Trust Dome passives, you really should have, ideally, like out of your 6 passives on your left side, 4 of them, at least 2 of them, but 4 of them should be element resistance of 7%. And obviously you can change that depending upon what meta you're seeing, but you really should have like Dark 7, Fire 7 on one rune. Another one you could go like Earth 7, Wind 7, and then you go HP and Luck 10% as your last 2. And that way, at the very least, you're mitigating 7% of all their damage. But then the Esper nodes, I think most people don't recognize the value of element resistance on your Espers, and making sure that when you are seeing like a heavy amount of dark, you can say, all right, well, I'll go Demon Wall for the dark res on my Esper, and that way I know I can put like a different element res buff somewhere else. And so I think the element resistance is a big tool to help some of that. But outside of that, in terms of just what you do from like a team perspective, I completely agree with JB in terms of scout what you're seeing. You're not going to beat all 6. No team can beat everything, but you can probably beat 3 on average, and really just focus on making sure that you have the ability to do some testing on your guildmates if possible. Like if your guildmates have defenses for those elements, just make sure you're testing and you're comfortable with the way your team moves, because every team moves completely differently, which I think is going to segue nicely to our second question here in terms of how to be efficient with time during mock battle.
Actually, real quick before we jump into that,
elaborate.
Well, you mentioned the trust stones there, and I completely agree with element resistances. It's I always kind of my first stone or slot 1 on the left side is something I always dedicate towards meta resistances for elements.
Absolutely.
I filter through, I have all of them there that I can cycle through if I need them. But then I also bake that into an HP set for another 5% resistance.
Thank you. Yep.
Then I'll throw in an Alex ring as well for another 5%. So then all of a sudden you're at 17% before you even talk about your espers or any other gear. So
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it.
No, that's an excellent call too. That's part of it. It's the HP touchstone set and the Alex ring, as you mentioned. And again, the Alex ring has huge benefits for aim and for crit rate. Like, and you talk about beating multiple elements. Well, that single accessory alone will enable you to beat some of the evasion teams as well as just your brawler teams. Like, it has multi-purpose, which again, this all segues really nicely, these questions together, because we're going to talk about that in the armor section. But yeah, how do you be efficient with your time during mock battle? Like, what do you normally spend for time on a mock battle? Is it expensive?
Well, I mean, anytime a new map comes up, that's when I do most of my mocking, and I'll do it for a couple of days. And then, once I have a few variations of things I can cycle through, I'll kind of be all set with that unless something's just not working, and then I'll go back in there. At this point, I don't want to like toot my own horn, but I know the AI, I know how things work so well that personally I don't even need to mock in a lot of cases. That's not even an exaggeration, but
Yep.
that's just kind of how things get when you've played the game as much as I have.
Yep.
But I will say that one thing that you want to do is make sure that you're doing those mocks on a phone, especially if it's an iOS phone. It just loads so much faster than Android and an emulator for some reason. It loads lightning. It loads at least 3 or 4 times quicker for me.
Bastard.
So anytime I need to bang out a bunch of mocks, I always switch to my phone.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, no, that's kind of my recommendation too, in the vein of what you're talking about with AI. I think the best advice I can give is when you make your team is to have I call it like an opening rotation. What's your first turn going to be for all 3 units and where they're going to go? If you can literally lock down what your team is going to do in the first turn, and you know for a fact that they're not going to get baited if an enemy walks in, or they're going to go somewhere weird in case you have hate in a different spot. If you can ensure that your team is the fastest and just make sure that at all times you can lock down what your first turn is, you'll more than likely see some positive results from it. Far too often teams will just beat themselves because you have variability in every team you fight. All of a sudden a team is in a different slot for their tank and your whole team is bad now. If you just focus on that first turn, making sure it's consistent, you'd be surprised how well that yields results, because you can build off of that, but you need to start there.
One thing that I'll add too is that you can also eliminate some of the time that you might have some mistakes when you're mocking, like maybe certain buffs go off that you weren't expecting or didn't even want. Just turn them off before you go in.
You have to,
go in. You say, okay, I definitely want this buff. I definitely want that buff. The rest of them I don't care about. I'm just going to turn them off now.
Yep.
Then you don't even need to worry about any AI preferences or situations where they might come up where you didn't want them or expect them.
Absolutely.
So,
nope, agreed. And then finally here, how often do we use armor anymore? This is the interestingly specific question. Do you use armors still? Yeah, all the time, quite honestly. Yeah.
Brigandine, still use it all the time. Black Garb all the time. Survival Vest all the time. There's a host of TMR armored pieces that I use, like Robb's TMR, even like Agrius's TMR, like for Protect and Shell, Kane's TMR for haste, movements. There's a ton of great armor still in the game.
So I agree, and I am curious if this person meant to say armor and cloth, or if it's just like specifically armor. I'll assume it's both for the sake of argument. I will say there's definitely less usage nowadays, because I think there's lots of armors and cloths just like aren't that great. You look at, I don't know, what the mithril armor, who's using mithril armor in 2023? Nobody. You know what I mean? But there are certain pieces of armors and cloths that are best in slot. The Brigantine is absolutely one of them. I actually don't think the Survival Vest is one at the moment, only because I think the Silent Solar Rays, the accessory from the selection quest, is better. Quite frankly, I just think it's more flexible too. But yeah,
it's just that only females can use it is the problem.
Oh, thank you. That's a really good consideration. But right, other than that, Survival Vest is still best in slot. Oh god, what was the other? Oh, Black Garb is still one of the best evasion pieces of gear you can put on. Very valuable. So there's definitely a smaller handful than average, but it's still pretty common.
I will add to that too that there have been a lot of accessories that have come out that have really high HP and defense that at least make them comparable to like a cloth,
Yeah.
like you mentioned the silent the Solarays. There's a bunch of other ones too that kind of in that same vein. So
Yep. Definitely. And you bring up a good point too. Even on TMRs, if you're min maxing your stats that way, like there's a lot of good armor TMRs. And then our last question here for the night is: what are the top five? And I don't know if I have five. I have like two or three units whose power doesn't match up with their power in the story. What would you give them to fix the disparity? And making it easier, let's exclude another story. This is just like Leonis and Ildyra characters only. Do you have any that come to mind immediately?
so I think we I mean we've I feel like we've touched on this one a little bit before, and I think a couple that came up were Ramada and Lilith.
Yes, those are two of mine for sure.
Yeah. So those two, like obviously they're very important to like Mont's army and kind of a couple of his generals. They have UR units in the game, and this is the problem that they're very early on UR units, like first year, and they just weren't even good when they were released. Like Winter Ramada joke unit,
Yep.
Summer Lilith, she may have been decent when she was released in JP, but we got her a year late.
Yep.
Her time in the sun was gone.
Yeah, they're always
And
late on
then
the upgrades too, the MA2s and whatnot. So they're just always behind the
awful.
curve. Yeah.
So yeah, those are a couple of definites. Another one that I'll throw into the ring I was thinking of was actually somebody we talked about before was Varouche. Who, like he
Oh,
seems like he's very important in the story with kind of being like the caretaker of O's weapon. It's like this very powerful weapon, and I feel like there's maybe more to come with him, like as the story goes on, and he seems to have some important role to play. But his unit he's one of the worst units in the game. We ranked him as such, when we did put in that tier list the other day. So
yep.
um how I would fix him, he needs more survivability. Like spirit isn't cutting it these days. That's kind of like one of his main niches is he can get very strong spirit.
Right.
He does kind of have like the regen and shell as well, but the problem is he has such small range that he needs to be able to he needs to be much more survivable as he's kind of making his way sieging the enemy. That's he just doesn't have it today.
I like it. No, that's super niche usage that just ends up being bad because it's so niche. I like that. That's a call out. I absolutely agree with Lilith and Ramada. That's the first two that came to mind as well. I think honorable mention, and they've done a lot to fix this. Curry was one of them for me. Where how do you make an MR unit be like one of the biggest, baddest, most feared, endgame guys in the story? I felt that way a little bit about Eld and Robb as well, more early on. But I think they're probably accurate. They were never touted in the storyline as like huge behemoths. I think Miraga has at least nowadays been given enough power creep that he can kind of match his in-game, story lore. But I think one of the ones that I immediately also came to mind was Seymour, similar to Varouche. Like you got this guy that's like just chilling with Gilgamesh. He's like his body, not bodyguard, but like they like fight on equal. Like they're like actually fighting hordes of enemies together. And Seymour is just this kind of like MR unit that like whatever. I
He
think
absolutely needs a UR version. Like I'm here for a UR Seymour.
yeah,
We need that.
and he's still in the game. He's still in the story. He's still a prominent character. So it's not like he was like a one-time thing. For him to be an MR and just like not be good, I don't. He's not. Unfortunately, I mean he's fine, but you know what I mean for power wise. And to fix him,
I,
yeah, tough. I would just say a little more survivability and better buffs. I don't know. It's hard to say.
I think you can put Adelard in that same bucket where he's another. I mean, there was that famous kind of cutscene where he's sitting there like blocking all of Lucia's shots with his sword. Like he's another unit that badly needs a UR version. I'm totally here for a UR Adelard as well.
I'd be okay with that. He definitely is kind of like I don't know what the word is, like declined in the story prominence a little bit. But you're right, lore wise, I think most of the MR units, because early on in the game, a lot of the main storyline units were put as MR units, and I remember just seeing a lot of them and being like, "How?
One other one that comes to mind, I think, would be Ildyra, where
Oh, good
she's
one."
like she's hugely important in like the kind of the first, I don't know, season or first part of the story. Yeah, her role is kind of diminished a little bit, at least since kind of the end of that first book. But um, she has been always been kind of a dud of a unit. When she was first released, she never made any impact on the meta, never really did anything,
Nope.
and her upgrades haven't done anything to really change that. So what she needs is more HP. What she needs is more damage.
More
She needs
evasion.
some. She
They,
needs some way to survive. She needs everything, to
so
be honest. She
they
needs
they
AP management.
yeah, they kind of made her an evade unit in the early stages, and then just never ran with it. She just got power crept immediately from an evasion perspective, and didn't have the bulk. She had the self sacrifice, the negative resistances. So you can't do both. You can't be not evasive and have bad resistance. Like, you just can't do that and have low HP, and then have like a drain force build on a character that doesn't have high HP. Like, this doesn't work. None of it works. I feel like, oh, I'll go honorable mention for Raldor too. Raldor is like heavily featured in story part 2, like actually like one of the most important people in Jaden's army, and this dude has just done like nothing for 2 years, and we're in a strike meta right now and still does nothing. Like,
Well, I mean, maybe once he gets his 140, he'll be a little bit better. He still doesn't have his 140 in JP.
it's crazy. Well,
Um,
and he's
he,
so single target oriented. I feel like it's tough.
I mean, I wouldn't mind having him in the strike team because he does have the strike and peril on his LB, which is, I mean, pretty hard to find.
It is a good point.
I think he's actually gotten decent upgrades, like from where he started, but
Oh, he's way
I
better.
feel like the upgrades have just always come so late in the cycles for him that, and it seems like that's continuing again with the 140. He's like going to be one of the last ones to get it. I don't know. We'll have to see where he ends up.
Yeah, no, I
But
completely agree. Right, because at no point has anyone ever been like, "Oh yeah, Raldor, like he's really powerful. He's a good unit." He's like, yeah, he's fine. Yet he's like Jaden's number 2, like, leading the charge. Good stuff. All right. Well, that's essentially all we had for the questions today. We do still have some others. I promise you, those that submitted, we have them on the backlog for next week. But this is a busy session with obviously a lot of stuff going on here with new character releases again. But for now, I'm excited still just to have the game keep rolling along. I'm pretty happy with the balance and the rate of the dream upgrades. They are getting a little more liberal and with the scrolls. For those of you that didn't see, what was it, like 20 scroll packs you could buy, or 30 scroll packs you could buy this week in the shop? That was a nice step up.
yeah, I agree. I mean, the scrolls obviously are still very expensive, but I don't know exactly what they got for freebies in JP, but I feel like, between the various events and kind of some of the goodies that Gumi has been giving out and from gifts and from live streams and stuff, I feel like, even like purely free to play in another month or two are gonna would probably have enough to fully reincarnate a unit, just based on handouts. So
Yeah.
not great, but maybe not as bad as I was expecting. I hope that Gumi does lower the price a little bit of them, because I think that's those, and especially antlers now I'm running super low on. The amount of units coming in and the amount of good units coming in is
Right.
definitely put those at a little bit of a premium. Whereas in the EX era broadstones, I don't think were that much of a bottleneck for me, at least not that I recall.
No, blossoms
So
were, but not the broadstones. And even then,
mhm.
blossoms, they gave them out with good frequency pretty quickly. But either way, they're accelerating the schedule. I'm sure we have some exciting new global exclusive units that are still on the slate, that aren't Addison Ray. I mean, she's probably part of it, to be honest. That is one of them. But there's a lot of other good stuff coming that lots to look forward to here.
Actually, I've heard some speculation, and I think it's actually good speculation that Gumi is maybe clearing out some space for a simultaneous release of JP and GL for maybe a Final Fantasy 16
Oh
collaboration
yes,
when that game comes out. I think that's a pretty good theory. Maybe we'll see it. Maybe, who knows?
let's see how
No
that
doubt.
goes. But cool. All right. Well, again, another great podcast. Thanks again for the time. This is always fun, JB. And any closing thoughts for people?
Yeah, so just doubling back on what you said, thank you everyone for sending in the questions. Obviously, we had a lot to dig into this week. We have more to come. Keep sending them. There was always good stuff to kind of end on and kind of have a good conversation. So, uh, thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Cool. That's it for now. Have a good night, everybody. We'll talk to you all soon.